Hi, I'm Rob Hegele. I'm an endocrinologist and a professor of medicine at the Schulich School of Medicine and Dentistry at the University of Western Ontario in London, Ontario, Canada. And I'm speaking to you today in reference to a time capsule article that my co-author Grant Maltman and myself have written for the Lancet Diabetes and Endocrinology. And really the topic is to commemorate or to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the discovery of insulin. Now there are many possible dates that we could have chosen, to try to choose a single date for such an event. Should we have chosen the preclinical studies done by Banting and Best in Toronto, or the first in human success at Toronto General Hospital, or the patenting of insulin, or the awarding of the Nobel Prize? Really, all of these events follow from what we think is the seminal event, the birth of the idea of insulin, which occurred on the night of October the 31st, actually 2 in the morning, October the 31st, 1920. And this is when Banting, who was working at the time as a physician in the city of London, Ontario, Canada, was preparing for a lecture to be delivered at the medical school on the topic of the pancreas. And he conceived an idea that had eluded hundreds of investigators about a possible approach to isolate the internal secretion of the pancreas, so the hormone insulin. And Banting then conceived this, jotted it down in his notebook. Again, the date and the time were 2 a.m., 31st of October, 1920. He then went to the University of Toronto and pitched his idea to the professor of physiology, John MacLeod, who then provided him with a laboratory and support and a student assistant, Charles Best. Banting and Best then succeeded the next summer in using the method to improve the status of a diabetic dog. And then the fourth member of the team, James Collip, was brought in the autumn of 1921. And he really provided the key step that allowed insulin to be purified to the point that it could be given to human subjects. And the first then successful use of insulin in a human being was in January of 1922. So it's a tremendous story, actually. It's a very, very human story, a lot of drama, a lot of ups and downs, but ultimately it led to success, led to the awarding of the Nobel Prize to MacLeod and Banting in 1923. And of course now, 100 years later, insulin is just as important, if not even more important than when it was first discovered. It has had a positive impact on the lives of millions of people around the world, and not to mention has transformed the field of endocrinology. And so that's really why we've chosen this date, and that's the rationale behind our article. For the next few minutes, we want to take you through the former home of Frederick Grant Banting, located at 442 Adelaide Street in London, Ontario, Canada. So Banting was born on the 14th of November, 1891, north of Toronto. In 1912, he entered the University of Toronto Faculty of Medicine. He chose surgery as his specialty. His classmate was Norman Bethune, who later served as physician for Chairman Mao Zedong. Banting completed his medical degree in December 1916, and then in 1917 he went to the front lines in Europe in World War I as a medical officer. He suffered a shrapnel wound in 1918 to his right arm, and he received the Military Cross for Valor for this. After the war, he returned to Canada for a surgical internship in Toronto, and then he moved to London, Ontario on July 1st, 1920. He wanted to establish a private medical practice, and he bought this house at 442 Adelaide Street. He lived on the second floor and practiced medicine on the first floor. The home is now a museum known as Banting House National Historic Site. The curator is Grant Maltman, and Grant will now show us some of the museum's highlights.
So this is Dr. Banting's office, where he set up his practice on July 1st, 1920. It was not a build it and they will come scenario. This is a physician who moved to London without any real contacts, who did just about everything wrong when he came here. He didn't take over a retired doctor's practice. His location wasn't great. It wasn't a high traffic area for patients to come by and see that the practice was here. The phone book had come out 3 months before he moved here. So he's literally 0 for 3. He opens a practice on July 1st, 1920. His first patient arrives 28 days later. With a struggling practice, Banting is looking for other opportunities to generate income. And fortunately, Frederick Miller from the University of Western Ontario Medical School came calling. They were looking for demonstrators in surgery, physiology, and anatomy. And Banting suggested he be one of the people that filled that position. He was going to be $2 an hour, which is a welcome increase in income for him, considering his entire July income was $6. His first week at Western would have brought him $6 in income. Okay, so there's Frederick Miller, who hired Banting, and there's Frederick there. So this is the most important room in our house and our most important artifact. This is Dr. Banting's bed, and it was here 100 years ago on October 31st, 1920. After a night of restless sleep, Dr. Banting arose and put to paper 25 words that would change the course of diabetes research history. Those 25 words would lead to the discovery of insulin 10 months later, after only 12 weeks of experiments. So what we have here are the 25 words that he wrote. And what it says is, diabetes, ligate pancreatic ducts of dogs, keep dogs alive till the senile degenerate, leaving islets, try to isolate internal secretion of these, and relieve glycosuria. What's really interesting about the document are two things. One, the discovery of insulin, can't spell his disease. It's not diabetes from the Latin. And you can see here, he realized it was after midnight. He strikes out the October 30th and replaces it with October 31st. We get 3 types of visitors to Banting House National Historic Site of Canada. We get the people affected by diabetes, the medical research community, and the cultural tourists. Our most interesting and engaging visitors are the research communities, these doctors from around the world who come here to seek inspiration, see where the origin story of the discovery of insulin began, and ironically, knowing museums are not supposed to touch anything, they all want to touch his bed and seek inspiration for themselves. So before the discovery of insulin, as a parent you have 2 choices. You do nothing and your child will slip into a coma and die, or you can put them on what was the standard treatment at the time, the Allen starvation diet. It's a horrible way to extend one's life, but as everyone's doing, as a parent, you're holding out hope that somewhere, someone will come up with something. So this child here is 3 years old and weighs 15 pounds. Sometimes when you gamble, you win. Here's the same child 1 year later on insulin. Dear Dr. Banting, I'm a fat boy now and I feel fine, is one of the letters that Dr. Banting received from children around the world. Here at Banting House, we not only talk about the origin story of the discovery of insulin, but we also take great care to talk of the legacy. And the ultimate legacy is the awarding the 1923 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine to Dr. Banting and Dr. MacLeod. Controversial to this day over who should have deserved credit for the discovery. We do interpret it as a co-discovery that the 4 men, Banting, Best, Caldwell, and MacLeod, all deserve recognition for this gift to the world that continues to be as relevant today as it was 100 years ago. Shortly after being awarded Canada's first Nobel Prize, the Detroit Free Press did a brief story on Banting House, referring to it as the birthplace of insulin, calling it a shrine to the medical world, and suggesting it be turned into a museum and becoming a National Historic Site. This is the August 27th, 1923 edition of Time magazine. It's the first year of publication for Time, and Banting is the first Canadian to appear on its cover. With 1 patient in 28 days, Dr. Banting had time to develop a personal hobby and escape. And for him, that was his art. By the mid-1920s, he became good friends with A.Y. Jackson, Canada's group of 7 artists, and produced about 200 works. He said at 50, he would give up science and devote his life to art. So this painting here is the only one to have survived from his London period. We know it's from the London period because he discusses painting on laundromat cardboard because he couldn't afford art canvas. And this was in the house. when the Rowland Hill family he was sharing the house with, they saved the painting from the garbage. On July 7th, 1989, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, came to the birthplace of insulin and kindled the flame of hope. The flame of hope is to stay lit until a cure for diabetes is found, and the doctor or team of doctors, no matter where in the world they are, they'll be brought to London to extinguish the flame and open the International Diabetes Federation time capsule. So every year on World Diabetes Day, we unveil bricks that people have purchased from around the world, bricks of hope, remembrance, letting people know that we're still looking for a cure for diabetes. Today is the statue we're looking at is a life-size statue of Dr. Banting, representing that October 31st moment when he was writing his idea, and then the flame of hope, which burns brightly until a cure for diabetes is found.
I'd like to thank my co-author, Grant Maltman, also the curator of Banting House National Historic Site. The museum receives thousands of visitors a year who come to experience the life and times of Frederick Grant Banting, and we encourage you, if you're ever in London, Ontario, Canada, to do so and experience it for yourself. Thanks for your attention today.